ever worried that you might be the cool kid? You wear the latest fashions on top of all the trends. Or have you ever worried you were too much in the mainstream? Always so generic, more normal than your friends. Well, we've devised a test to put to rest your fears. There's no need to panic if you lend us your ears. Tonight you can't sleep easy after all that you've heard. Cause if you like the show, then you're probably a nerd. Oh, Canon, it's Canon, it's all. Tyler, Phil, and Boris. Oh, Canon, it's Canon, it's all in Canon.
It's Wednesday. You know what that means. It's time for another new episode of the It's Canon podcast, the podcast that brings you anything and everything in the world of pop culture. We talk about comic books, we talk about toys, we talk about video games, we sometimes talk about comics, we talk about Lego, we talk about stock markets. Who are we? Well, we're the It's Canon podcast. As always, we're your hosts. I'm Boris, and as always, I'm joined by Phil.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? How are you doing out there?
And the one, the only, the illustrious, the infamous, the negavis, I don't know what the fuck that is, the Tyler.
Negavis, nice.
Negavis.
I'd like to file my formal complaint that we called it Stocks instead of Stonks.
I know.
Stonks only.
I know. I screwed up, guys. Yeah. I screwed up.
It's all right.
I should quit. I should just quit. Phil, it's your show. Fuck it.
Stonks.
Stonk.
We're gonna talk stonk.
I love the fact that here we are, ready to talk about very serious adult subject.
So, I have a way of describing this, and that is that this is about a very important adult subject that's going to affect millions, if not billions, of lives around the world. It's going to change livelihoods, but it's also entirely make-believe.
Oh my god. That is the best way to put it. It really is. Oh my god, it really is. Wow.
Like, it's all make-believe. And I say this as someone who I did my undergraduate minor in business administration with a focus on org theory and finance.
My god. You just
It's all make-believe.
You ruined the world.
Nothing exists.
You ruined the world. You ruined the world.
Well, I mean, every economist and even every finance person is going to admit, like, it's all make-believe. None of it's real. It's all just collective delusion.
Well, when you honestly start thinking about the core of it, and let's say Boris Aguilar is an analyst, and Boris Aguilar is looking at various stocks, and the fact that one article that I put out can literally make or break a company's stock, make or break millionaires. What type of system is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's as we're going to go in more with our interview, it's an inefficient system. And the theory, if we're going to get all economic theory behind it, and I'm going to preempt anyone who's going to be like, Tyler, you've left your left-wing cred. Look, this is just economics. It's whether you're a capitalist or not. Economics still applies. Markets still apply, whether you're going to use, an entirely market, decentralized economic basis, or you're going to try to use something else.
Yep.
Markets exist.
Exactly.
And the theory is that this is how we allocate resources. And in theory, if your one article can make or break a stock, the market's inefficient.
Yep, exactly. And again, so before we start this episode, before we move on, I think it should be said that, number one, this episode is about information and entertainment. What you do is up to you. We are no way telling you to do anything. We are in no way telling you to buy any stocks. We are in no way telling you to sell stocks. We are in no way trying to tell you to stop doing what you do. Your life is you, and that is that. Also, in the world of disclosure, we all have our various portfolios, and as we talk about various subjects, we will disclose whether we own or not said stock. If we do own it, we will say we do. If we don't say anything, make the assumption that we don't own it. Also, we are joined by an awesome guest, one of Tyler's friends. Tyler, could you tell us a little bit more about our guest on today's episode?
Yeah, so someone I went to high school with, and we actually both went to law school at about the same time. He's got a master's degree from the University of Toronto in, global affairs. It's the MGA through the Munk School. He's also got a law degree from Osgood, which is, depending who you ask, either the best or the second best law school in our illustrious Great White North. And he's going to talk a bit more about his specialty because I know enough to keep up in a conversation with him, but not enough to know everything of what he does at his job.
Yeah. See, we
don't work in the same specialties.
Yeah. I know enough to have conversations with people, to host a podcast about these stuff. But I was blown away by Ian. Like, he killed it. He was awesome. Yeah. I want to thank him again for joining us, for talking to us, for explaining the markets to us, and for kind of giving some gotchas to some new people who are interested in that zone.
Yeah. No, he is ridiculously competent. He didn't go into this, but I have to share these two quick bits because it kind of adds to his credibility. Ian has literally interned with NATO. Like, he's interned with NATO for a summer. And he did work in, I think it was Jamaica. Was it Jamaica or Haiti? He did work in the Caribbean on, like, police reform.
Of course.
All of this was prior to, like, going corporate.
Of course. I love it. No, but he was awesome, and Tyler, thank you for introducing him to us, and hopefully we can get him back as we expand and continue looking at these subjects. But like I said, all of this is for pure entertainment and knowledge and information. What you do with any of this is up to you, and we will disclose our positions as we talk about them. Tyler, anything else that we need to disclose before we move forward?
Ian is a lawyer, but he is not your lawyer, and he's going to go into it more specifically, but he's not giving you any advice, and he's talking in general about stuff. Secondly, though I have a law degree, I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on TV and in podcasts.
Barely
so anything
then.
I say, and barely then. Like, I have a law degree, which I have in turn used to do policy commentary and analysis and stuff. I have never practiced as a lawyer. I've never been barred, which means I've never been given the ability to properly practice as a lawyer. So don't take anything I say as though I'm a lawyer. Take it as though I'm, at best, a mildly incompetent policy analyst.
Needless to say...
On Stonks.
On Stonks.
Stonks.
Needless to say, talk to a financial advisor, get an accountant, talk to a lawyer. If you want to do anything that's going to, like, drastically impact your life, these are the best bets. Someone who is able to look at your situation is so much better than a random voice on a podcast or television. And if someone is on television or a podcast telling you to listen to them instead of your own lawyer or accountant, they're lying to you.
Yep. Here's the thing. Why are we doing this episode then, Tyler? Why are we talking about these things? That is because it is making headlines everywhere. We are seeing things that we have never seen before in the market. We are seeing things and the market act in such a way that we haven't seen in 12, 13 years. So it's going to make news, and it's something to keep our eyes on as, you know, we have a new administration in the US of A, as, you know, the world is continuing the pandemic world and hopefully start its recovery. So all of these things really add up into an interesting outlook into not only what we're going through today, but what we are going to be going through tomorrow.
Yeah, and let's just remember as well, all this kind of came out of pop culture as far as this phenomenon in the past week or two that we've all been watching. It's happening on Reddit. It's happening on social media. And those are realms that we all dabble in on this show. And it's hard for us to not be drawn into the fact that GameStop was the stock that was most actively traded. And we've been talking about this for months now, about watching that stock and watching that company and how it's reacting to the COVID world, the digital sales world, all of the stuff that we focus in, day out. This gives our audience a little bit of an ability to take a larger view into what the actual implications could be and what the laws and the rules are surrounding those industries that we don't really think about when we're memeing it up or doing the other crap that people do on the internet to just have fun.
Yep. That's
And
exactly
in
it.
the traditional way of these instances, a film has already been greenlit and they've already announced some casting decisions.
Not only has a film been greenlit, I believe that a film and 2 series have been greenlit off a book that hasn't even been written yet about game stonks.
Look, someone has a really good agent, and that agent, I am betting, went home and ingested no illicit substances, none at all, before just throwing money up in the air and then rolling around in it.
Yeah. Oh my God. Like when I read this, I was just like,
this social network.
That's it. I believe the book is going to be called The Antisocial Network. Literally, I think that's what the book's called.
Is Trent Reznor doing the soundtrack?
Let's assume
Not
he
yet,
is.
but he's in negotiations.
Okay.
What a world
We'll
we
pick
live
the
in, guys.
phone
Like, this
out.
is honestly the world that we live in, where things are being greenlit, picked up. I bet you it's already been canceled on Netflix.
Yeah.
Actually, Netflix is the one doing the movie.
I know.
Oh,
Yeah, they already announced it.
the movie is much more palatable because it's one and done.
The movie, I think, is a better venue for it.
Yeah.
It is also worth, just a quick diversion to continue our topic pop culture thing, but it's worth noting that this is just de rigueur. It's just what happens in nonfiction now, is if you have a decent enough platform and you can kind of sort of string some words together and you have an idea that an editor thinks can sell, you've got a book.
Yeah.
And then immediately, if you have a big enough platform, or you have something that is sexy enough, they're immediately going to start shopping that for your movie and television rights.
So my face, does
I
that
have
count?
Yeah, right. That's it. I have a friend who is a writer, and in the 90s, she sold rights to a movie, never got made, and she still pocketed a cool mill for it.
Yeah, that's the beauty, right? Like, we have friends of the show, creators who have sold their content, and they're just waiting for it to be greenlit, and they got the paycheck because they sold it, but whether it gets made into anything or not, we'll see. One of them being Jim's up.
First paycheck.
Yeah.
In a completely weird universe. Today I was looking at Twitter, and I think Jim Zub announced that a comic that he wrote 12 years ago, his first kind of option for DC/Marvel, is published now, and he's just he didn't even know it was coming out. So
Oh god, that'll happen.
That
He'll just
happens.
get a check someday.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
yeah,
That happens so much.
pretty cool.
It's all over the place. I've got stuff like that that's sitting in development hell somewhere.
Yeah.
A book I wrote and handed in 4 years ago is supposed to be out later this year. And
Is
I'm
this a
like,
spy
alright,
book?
sure.
Is this a spy book?
No.
Damn.
Is it a book about stonks?
No.
Is this
It's
a
about-
book
Created
about...
that stonk word.
I think I talked about this book.
You did. I
in the
remember
first
this.
season of the podcast.
I do remember this, and that's why, you know who would know? Kyle would know.
I gotta talk to Kyle. I offered him some work, so I gotta talk to. But for the audience, Kyle has returned. He messaged me. Apparently, I've inspired him, and he's now going to become an RPG writer and designer. So I've bankrupted another person. There's no money in it.
I love the fact that he went from filmmaking to RPG writer. So from no money to negative money.
Well, my understanding, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're around film, it is viable to make a middle-class life doing the kind of stuff for other people and then like kind of pursuing your stuff on the side. You know, being an editor and then like, oh yeah, like I do my film fest things and I'm going to try to break out there, but you're still, you pay, the day job pays the bills kind of thing, and you're still in the industry. Versus in RPGs, there are like 24 people who've like, that's their full-time gig.
It's ridiculous. I love it, but it scares me so much. Like, it's something that I, you know, as a teenager, it's something that I honestly thought of pursuing and whatnot. But number one, my mom would never allow it. My mom said going into law is useless. What if you fuck up halfway through?
I mean, fair. God, all right.
Yep.
Going into medicine is useless. What if you kill someone? Like, okay, that's the insurance.
Right? Welcome to my childhood, Tyler. Why do you think I'm drinking on a Tuesday? What, 3/4 of a bottle? But yeah.
Don't get into stonks.
Don't get into stonks, boys and girls.
Gamestop.
Day trading. What if you make billions of dollars? All right, what are we talking about today?
Well, I think we have to quickly go over before the interview too. I know Boris has some stuff that he wants to talk about.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
I always have stuff I want to talk about. Let's talk about energy, the energy around us. How does that sound?
Like, is this like are you like talking about woo-woo crystals and Reiki now? Because if that's the direction this is going, that might be what makes me walk.
I think we missed in our weekend episode. I believe that on the news roundup, we missed and we threw to this episode for the earnings reports coming in from many companies.
Exactly. So I love how Phil is trying so hard to steer us back into direction. And I'm doing everything.
When I see insanity on 2 of my 3 feeds, someone's got to steer it.
I'm trying to toss it back to someone to steer the wheel.
I know.
I'm like, I don't want the wheel. Someone else take the wheel.
Jesus.
And I see Boris off the mic. So.
I know. I love it. So here's the thing. So on the weekend, here's what happened on the weekend episode. Because a couple people brought it up to me. It's like, wow, you guys blew through a few subjects. Well, we were on a time crunch. We were on a time crunch.
It was kind of funny.
Yeah, we blew through.
Oh, yeah.
WandaVision. Hey, you like it? You like it? Good. We're done.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a lot else to say about it. It's a really good show. Go watch it.
Yeah, okay, so, Boris, focus. So one of the subjects that I wanted to talk about on the weekend, but it also made more sense to talk about it here on this special episode, and that is stock markets and earnings reports. So I wanted to focus on Apple, Microsoft, and Tesla because they have an interesting story and a very different story as they are, dare I say, crushing the market. So let's get it. I want to get a little in depth. We're not going to get into too much detail of, they made X figures. Let's talk in general terms, guys. So, Tesla, Microsoft, Apple. These 3 companies.
I own stocks in both Apple, and I just liquidated my Microsoft holdings.
There you
we
go.
said we'd disclose.
Yeah, I was literally.
that's
no idea
that's
on my
literally
portfolio,
where I was going to go. Was like, do we have anything to do? Oh, I love how we're talking over each other. And now no one's talking.
I'm pretty sure.
No, we did it.
No, I'm pretty sure. Half a Tesla. I'm kidding.
Wait, you own half of Tesla or half a Tesla? I own a Tesla every second weekend.
Maybe I have a wheel in my garage.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other part of this disclosure is all this is separate from, like, the TFSA funds and stuff we all buy into, that it's all black boxes. Because
we don't know.
I've bought into a hedge fund that owns parts of other hedge funds.
And that's what I was going to say. Something Phil, and I know Phil, sometimes you feel a little uneasy talking about this stuff because you don't know where the fuck your money is.
Yeah, I just know that it goes into my money management person
Yeah.
that I talk to once in a while, and we measure risk and we evaluate earnings and we do the adult stuff. But I don't typically. The most specific question I get asked is, do I want to have foreign holdings or domestic only, that type of thing. Like if there's any strong preferences in my makeup that I would like them to adhere to.
Yeah.
So
there's a name for that form under Canadian law that you have to. Yeah, it's a thing.
To be honest, I just filed it. Yeah.
And for me, I don't own anything in any of these three companies. So I think this is a good subject to bring up. So I think we're going to start in talking about Apple and how they are just absolutely killing things right now. Tyler, like, what's your take?
I mean, I'm actually disappointed in Apple right now. And I say this as someone who's holding is they just had their earnings last week?
Yep.
2 weeks ago?
Last week.
And considering we're in the middle of a pandemic and everything else, Apple had like a really solid earnings call. And despite that, their stock is kind of like, all right, it's not really moving that much.
Yep. There's been immediate movement where it went down. What's interesting is that Apple is starting to see what happened to BlackBerry 10 years ago. And again, I bring up BlackBerry. I worked there. I had stock there. Still have stock there. So for me, it's always like, it's the go-to tech company too, right? Especially when it becomes like when we talk about analysts and market manipulation and the effect that one bad article can have on a company. So Apple is starting to go through this because like Apple, they killed it. They did well. But they didn't do as well as some analysts believed that they would.
Well, but part of that is based off of market performance in the terms of the product line. And one of their underselling, because they don't really forthright disclose their model sales. We surmise it just by certain disclosures that they make. But one thing that they bet heavily on was the iPhone 6 mini, which is
12.
the entry level, iPhone 12 mini, which is the entry level phone into the marketplace, and that's just not performing strongly for them. They can't push it in markets like India because it doesn't have any manufacturing components in India yet, and it's just not gravitating to people's pockets as much as the SE, the other model that they released last year, that was basically an iPhone 6 or an iPhone 7 remake that's a little bit cheaper than this one. So they kind of sandwiched the lower end of the market, and I think that disappointed some analysts. But we also have to, report on the fact that they overtook Amazon for biggest company again, or whatever that thing is. There was some kind of
highest valuation, or highest market cap,
something like that. They overtook Amazon by just a hair with that earnings release.
Yep.
So, as bad as the analysts' reaction are, I think in a way they're just trying to keep Apple honest on their product lines. Like but Apple are going to get there anyway.
Yeah. What's your take, Tyler? And speaking as an observer as opposed to a shareholder.
Oh yeah. I mean, I for both of them, like I'm a shareholder because I thought it was going to get a bigger bounce from this earnings call. I bought in late 2020, kind of seeing the news and stuff, and I think they're underperforming a little bit right now, and I do think that part of that is because this last 2 weeks, the whole fiasco of GameStop, but then we haven't even talked about how much of that, like, how there was they tried to do the same thing with Dogecoin in the crypto space, which was bizarre, how much that's taken the oxygen out of the room, and that tech stocks in general, like part of this sizzle is that they're sexy and they have high uncertainty. Yep. So I think it's underperforming a little bit. I think they had a solid year considering all the metrics of what's going on in the world, and then
look at their silicon products. Like, geez, the M1 chip is killing.
I have a question for the two of you guys. Do you think, and this is coming from talking as the host of the It's Canon podcast, do you think that their legal battles have brought some more attention, eyes, negative attention, made some movements on their stock overall?
I'm not seeing any evidence of that personally. I would, if anything, I would expect to get more of a chilling effect based upon the new administration's, thus far as limited posturing, but their kind of apparent attitude towards tech, towards crypto, and towards monopolies.
Yeah.
You know, they haven't done anything yet other than appoint a couple people, but the Biden administration has kind of gestured towards they're going to get involved in that once the current round of crises is over.
Yeah. Yep.
I would expect that to have more of a chilling effect.
I agree. Yeah,
and I think if there's people who are dumping because of the games controversies and the lawsuits and the legal troubles, there's a healthy appetite of people that are going to scrap this, take the stock up, because it is a wise investment. I don't think that Apple are going to lose their shirt in a legal battle. I don't think that they're at
it's one of those companies
any huge
that,
amount of danger.
Yeah, you can possibly lose money depending on when you bought in, but it's one of those stocks that where it's kind of like, okay, it's going to do well in the long term.
Well, and we have the information as well. Tyler brings up some very good points. I'm going to acknowledge that, because I feel like if I say something that it's going to dismiss his points, because those points are certainly valid and there is concern with the administration. But there's also a lot of rumor about a new Apple car.
Yeah.
And once that starts hitting investors, as that rumor mill cranks and cranks and cranks, because they lured Tesla people over, they have done a lot of moves that have got people talking in those tech rumor spaces. And I know we don't like to be in rumors, but they have filed patents. They're doing things. We don't know if it's going to be Apple car software that gets installed in a Kia or a Hyundai or something like that, or if it's going to be a fully autonomous car. We don't know what they're going to do.
Hold on. So here's the thing. That would be a huge play, and that would scare me as a BlackBerry shareholder, because BlackBerry is the owner of QNX, who has that contract with Tesla and Ford. You know, that's where BlackBerry makes their cash. So, you know, the fact that Apple is starting to file patents is scary, but they also filed patents for TVs.
Yeah.
So this is what I mean. Like, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, for me, okay, cool. They're filing patents, but just because it's an R&D doesn't mean we're going to get the D.
Sure.
I'm trying not to.
Yeah. I mean, to pull back to just high level. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would love a car announcement, like right after I file my taxes, so I can figure out my RRSP contributions for next year, because that'd be perfect. That'd be like, oh, mwah.
Yeah, well, let's be clear. I know Boris just floated out a big D one there, but let's just be clear that Apple are nowhere near making that announcement. By all analysts, you know, like people who really study the company, they're saying like 2027 at the earliest, before the car actually gets to market, if it is a car.
Yeah,
right?
But the announcement's going to
come.
Hold on, the announcement's going to come way sooner. So I think the fact that
but I think it's still a couple years out. Like they're potentially, like, what happened was, and I pay attention to this stuff a lot, so this is something that I've watched over the past few weeks, and that is Hyundai came out and said that, yeah, we're talking with Apple. And then the next day, Hyundai came out and said, lots of companies are talking to Apple. And then Hyundai came out and said, not only lots of companies, we might not be talking with them, and we may. And they just started walking it back, because obviously there was a panicked phone call from California telling them, hey, guys, get the fuck off, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then it was like, maybe they're talking to Kia. Maybe they're talking to this. Maybe they're talking to that. It's interesting.
Bazinga is saying Benzinga, I should say, which is a top tier financial reporting thing, is saying it's either Foxconn, who is behind several other companies, like it's a company that all but builds cars for the companies, or GM.
Interesting.
Yeah, Foxconn You know, I would love to do a special on them because I don't think people realize the reach that company has. Anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, Foxconn and Johnson & Johnson, and what's the other one? Triple M? Triple E? Triple M.
Triple M.
Yeah, Triple M. The three of those are, like, insane. Like, they own everything.
As well, you know what? Like, I don't know. It's an interesting spot. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. So, Microsoft basically underperforming in terms of analyst expectations. Tyler, you want to say something? Go ahead.
I want to throw one quick last little thing in on the Apple, which is analysts are also suggesting that they might be eyeing up a major purchase. With the two ones that are being suggested are Netflix and Peloton.
Yes.
Makes sense.
Those rumors have been rampant, especially when you take a look at the services that Apple are providing. You know, Apple TV, fantastic service, but it's missing that I don't know what. And then their Apple Fitness Plus is missing that I don't know what. So, you know, those make sense from an overall point of view, you know?
Oh, there's one other thing I wanted to mention. This is what slipped my mind earlier.
Yep.
Something that's interesting that's happening. It's going to touch another one of our companies that we're looking at in Tesla. Something interesting that's happening in the car manufacturer place that Apple could go into as well is the fact that they're becoming companies that contract out making of the cars for companies. Yeah. So much like Nike doesn't really make running shoes, they're a marketing company that has athletic apparel. All right. This is happening in cars, and Magna is actually stepping up to be one of those big companies that are manufacturing Mercedes-Benz and manufacturing other electric components of cars and things like that. And they're becoming this kind of mercenary in the car world where it's like anybody can pony up and say, we want you to make this. And who knows, Apple might do that. Sure. Apple might just say, hey, look, like here's an Apple car made by Magna.
Yeah.
Boom. Done.
Yeah. Hey, BlackBerry. Talk and say what you want about BlackBerry. This, recent rise of their stock isn't just because of the Gamestop stuff. Overall, 2021 has been very good to BlackBerry. And when we take a look at the past few years of BlackBerry, them stopping production of phones and selling that to DCL was huge. So I can see this continuing and this is
there's
this
also
is the trend.
A lot of rumors around that one too.
Yeah, and this is the thing.
There's a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, and I can see this being the trend. So not only in cell phones and in cars, but it's like, hey, we're just gonna put our brand on it, but you're gonna build it for us.
Yeah, that's basically what Apple does with Foxconn.
Yep, exactly. 100%. Apple,
yep.
Apple is an interesting company to look at. Yeah, they have the R&D, but there's so much more to them. Like, we can dedicate an episode to everything Apple. All right, so that's Apple, guys. Anything final that you want to throw out there, or shall we move on? All right,
I got my last thing on Apple. I just thought those purchases were important.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, we're gonna move on to Microsoft, the other side of the window. Thanks to Microsoft, Apple is still around. So Microsoft, interesting report, interesting overall quarter that they've had. I don't know how to really look at it as a person. Like, here's the thing: I am not a financial expert, but I follow this stuff as I don't want to say a fan, but you know what I mean, like as an observer. So Microsoft has made some interesting moves, and one thing that I want to call out before we talk about how they're performing is Microsoft has had a very good and lucky uptake of their Azure cloud service. Cloud computing is this big fancy word in technology. Cloud. Personally, I akin it to mainframe computing. It's mainframe computing plus where someone else hosts your stuff. But their contract with the government might be in jeopardy. So things with the American government, the $10 billion contract might be in jeopardy. But overall, all of that was reported in the past few days after their earnings report. But overall, their earnings report are doing well because of their services. And what have we been talking about on this show about Xbox?
That's the transition they're going. I mean, even with what you're talking about with Azure, like that is, again, it's just a service. And Microsoft really seems to be keying itself towards being more of a service-based company. And that's, I mean, if we look at tech larger, that the software as a service has been the direction analysts and wonks have been pushing for what, a decade now?
Yeah. Here's the thing. Tyler, Phil, I have a question for you. What's Microsoft's biggest product?
I would have guessed operating systems.
No, it's going to be some back-end thing.
Not even.
It's going to be...
It's something so obvious. And the OS is built around this product. Dramatic pause.
What are we talking, a browser?
Nope.
A browser?
Oh, can you imagine? Edge?
No, Edge exists to get Chrome, Opera...
Yeah, Chrome. It's Edge.
Or Firefox.
Yeah, it's Microsoft 365.
Well, yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. Is that biggest for revenue?
I believe it is. I don't have the numbers in front of me. If someone can check
that's
this,
now a subscription.
Yeah,
that's now a subscription. Back in the day, you used to have to come into the store, and seriously, it was my most guarded piece of software. It was behind glass. I caught like 3 people trying to steal it back in the day. It was $1,200. You'd go to Microsoft like symposiums, and Microsoft would shower you with free discs of it.
Yep.
And it was like the Oma Salima massive thing, and now it's like $10 a month.
Yep. But that's the thing.
It's like
I've taught even the boss that I have, not the boss, the guy who runs my wrestling podcast. Him and I had a deep conversation about softwares as a service and services and subscriptions in general. And again, I know I've said this so many times, but it's all about your monthly recurring revenue. And a way that a company does this is through their services. So Adobe, for example, this is why you can't buy, Photoshop 2021.
Yep.
It's because it's all a service now. It's all monthly subscription. Tyler, I feel like you have something to say.
Well, I'm reading through Microsoft's breakdown, and to put on analyst hat for a second, you gotta love these breakdowns. It's and I put this in a good way. It is hard to figure out what is the biggest, because if you look at their high level segment, the way Microsoft breaks it down, they break it down amongst personal computing,
yep,
intelligent cloud, and productivity and business processes, which are, in order, 35, 34, and 31%.
And then you have to decipher the products within
and then
each,
the rest
right?
of it is surface.
Yeah.
Well, the other side of it is, from their point of view, Office Commercial and Office Personal, so that's your 365 versus, I don't know what they call the business one,
Yeah.
are separate product lines to them. Yeah. It looks like Intelligent Cloud is, which is their their net cloud services.
Azure.
I can imagine a lot of companies decided when everybody had to work from home that they needed to go to companies like Microsoft and implement solutions in a very fast way.
Let me tell you about this. Let me tell you about this. And I feel maybe if I'm disclosing too much, I'm sorry, bosses, but let's talk about my work for a second, because the company I work for, we deliver a enterprise CCMS to customers. For the longest time, it was infrastructure was in-house. So if, for example, for Phil in this insurance company, it would be in-house in their infrastructure, in their DMZ. Which, now that people are working from home, it's a very problematic thing, because how do you access this? Do you access it through VPN? Do you access it through, other means? So this has been, honestly, for the past 8 to 10 months, the biggest headache for SaaS companies like the company that I work for. Now, luckily, we've gone the SaaS route. So we have our product up on AWS, and you can download it anywhere, but we still have some customers who have the in-house infrastructure, and that makes it super fucking difficult for us to manage. So, Phil, Tyler, 100%, that conversation you guys just had about, hey, since the pandemic, this is going on. Yeah, it's been the biggest headache and the biggest thing, because, we get so many complaints from customers regarding, what do you call it? Performance. And it's no, it's your company, not our product. It's your company, not our product. It's been, this is honestly, where the tech industry right now, if people want to know why your video game is not being completed so fast, if you want to know why that whatever you're waiting for is not being completed, this is why. Because we're all trying to figure out how the fuck we can get people who do stuff to get their stuff.
Yep.
Boris is just putting floppy drives in boxes and mailing them out.
Yeah, Boris, no, just, 3.5-inch discs.
To put a bow on at least where their earnings come from, Boris is 100% right. Microsoft Azure is the fastest growing growth channel. And it's worth noting that two other big products in Intelligent Cloud are SQL services, so running servers and shit, and GitHub. Oh, right. Microsoft owns GitHub.
That's something I honestly forgot. They bought GitHub.
Yeah. And GitHub is going to help them do R&D on their higher end commercial product.
Yeah.
100%. Because it's going to help them do that. And then there are higher end plans you can pay for on that, and there's ways of them making money off of it. It still makes them money, but it is also a great R&D.
Yeah.
Little box.
But
I mean, they're doing great.
Guys, let's take a step back. This is a company we think, oh, they make Office, they make Windows. But let's take a look at everything they actually do with Azure, with cloud computing, with their enterprise services and all this and that. It's insane what Microsoft and their reach is.
There's so much stuff that they do. Their tentacles are everywhere. And what do we talk about?
Office.
Xbox, which hasn't even turned a profit.
Wait,
and
what?
Stuff like that.
Hold
Xbox.
on.
Xbox is profitable.
And
is it?
Yeah, it's that division is profitable. But
Finally.
may I say, fuck 343 and fuck Halo. I got to get that in.
Yeah, I know, but it's just hilarious. Because Xbox always struggled. That's always been the funny bit that they've always said. But we know that there's a path to profitability, and I'm sure the services and whatnot, the services model is really starting to take off.
Yeah,
and it's cross-platform. It's a great thing, and they deserve the credit for it. And they've launched a new platform that they can't seem to keep anywhere near stock on right now. Same as Sony. So I'm pro Microsoft on this one.
So here's the thing. Let's look at this a little closer. Their Game Pass, and you know that for me, my personal prediction is that, and I know we're going back to video games, and but that's us, and I know this
that's what we do.
Space really well, and that's services as Game Pass. That's the future. And I still predict that this or the next console they make will be the last console that Microsoft makes. Because there were a lot of rumors running around that Xbox was going to finish with Xbox One. So I feel like they're putting in a lot of R&D right now in Game Pass. And that's why a little company, a little startup known as Google, is putting a lot of focus on their services in video games.
I just want to voice that those reports of Xbox never being profitable.
Yeah.
I can't find anyone saying that after 2017, and every year after that they experienced record growth.
Okay,
including it's worth noting that in 2020 they had for Xbox related revenue services 65% growth.
Wow.
Oh, good. I know it was something old. I agree.
Oh yeah,
it was a joke. It was a meme.
Yeah,
but yeah,
they were long-term planning on that, which I think was the right call.
I think the Xbox. Call. We all knew that too, right? We all knew that there was going to be one day where they were going to turn the corner. I'm glad that it's happened. Yeah, but as Boris was pointing out, like Google are doubling down. Despite all the reports that are coming out this week that because they got rid of their AAA in-house and thing that they're going out, but they're doubling down on all these games as a service. Microsoft are already in that space. It's happening.
People need to stop reading headlines and start reading the articles because it's clear.
Well, read the actual press release from Google.
Yeah. Stadia Studios is closing, which means that they're not going to have any in-house, first-party games. Exclusives. Yeah. That doesn't mean...
They've had them for 2 years. They picked some people out of Ubisoft. They picked some people out of Santa Monica Games. They picked some people out of some big high-profile studios. They had promise, but they never actually got a project off the ground. And I think what happened was they saw what Cyberpunk was able to do on their platform and what Ubisoft is doing with their titles on their platform. And they see an easier path to profitability than going down the exclusive market, which is an insane market to go down right now. Yeah. Because Microsoft and Sony own everything that's going to get any traction anyway.
And here's the thing. I think Google figured something out. Phil, I think Google is listening to us in our thoughts and reading our conversations because, yes, they're closing down their exclusive studio, but Google is doubling down on their services because my brother sent me a message last night. It's like, I'm very skeptical about this. And I'm like, listen, I am too, but you don't have hardware to deal with. And we live in 2021 where bad internet is a thing of the past. So how awesome would it be to game on any screen humanly possible?
Yep.
And here's a
high frame rate.
Even you shared an editorial article with us, and that's the thing. That's key. It's all editorial about what this means. We don't know what the future of Stadia is yet. The studio is closed down. They're focused on their customers. How you interpret this, that's up to you. But Google will let us know in the next little bit what all of this means. But for me, it means we are going to bring you a service comparable to Game Pass with third-party devs that will rock your socks.
Yep. They have something in the works called Project Hailstorm. I think that gets announced soon. And, honestly, if you look at YouTube right now, every video is, haha, I told you so. Yep. Stadia fails.
No, because they're reading headlines. Because they're reading headlines.
They didn't read anything. It's interesting. It's an interesting thing, and I'm curious to see where it goes.
We veered big time.
I poured into it. I know, and we did, but I poured into it big time. I'm curious to see where it goes. That's why I was posting those op-ed pieces because I wanted to show just how crazy some of the stuff is getting.
Yeah.
And you have to read it too.
Exactly. No, that's the thing. You really have
to be able to formulate.
Yeah. I get it, man. It's for me, it goes hand in hand with the Microsoft story just because it goes to show you how important services and SaaS products are to today's day and age. Tyler, anything to add?
On which I was still on Microsoft.
Oh, we're still on Microsoft.
Yeah. No, anyway. The short version, I think this might end on Microsoft, is literally every sector of Microsoft overperformed analysts in 2020 in every single quarter. Like everything they're doing is outperforming what people expect. And rock up.
Good for them. I'm actually really happy for them.
Microsoft is Microsoft,
Now
guys.
split
People
'em
can
up.
say what you want about Microsoft, but they are Microsoft. Tesla. Let's talk about Tesla, because this, to me, is always an interesting stock to talk about. I do not own any Tesla stock. Tyler, Phil, do you guys own any Tesla stock as far as you know?
In negatory on me.
You could not. If you gave me Tesla stock, I would sell it instantly. I don't want to touch that.
It's a bubble right now.
That is exactly it. Here, let's talk about Tesla. Yes, they are worth more than they've ever been worth. Yes, Elon Musk is worth more than he's ever been worth, and I'm using air quotes because it's all vaporware. Tesla is a company that, while it's performing well on the markets, ... That's why I stop, because there's nothing else.
There's a company that hasn't been really profitable.
I don't know. I don't think so. Like, they're trying to make cars.
They're trying to
You
make
know?
batteries. Let's
Battery
start there.
cars.
2020 was their first profitable year.
Yep, exactly.
And their stock exploded as a result. Like, talk about meme stocks.
Yeah.
But professionals did it. Come on.
And yeah, their profit does not come from making cars.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's only from regulatory credits. Without government support, Tesla is not a profitable company.
I think Tyler and I discussed this. I know Boris and I have discussed this. I know the three of us have discussed this. I think that a person buying Tesla stock is buying into the cult of Elon and thinks that they're buying SpaceX stock, thinks that they're buying like the pharmaceutical stock that Elon is companies that he's invested in. I think
Starlink.
that it's just
things like that.
Starlink, everything, like anything cool Elon's doing to a layperson, right? Like, you're not looking into his politics, you're not looking into his statements, you're just looking into what you see on the news and what you see where the hope is and where you see the future. And when all these things are done, they're done in a very sensational way. And people think, hey, I want to get attached to this guy somehow.
Yep.
I'm going to buy stock.
Yep.
So,
in Elon.
I am super skeptical of Tesla, but I'm going to steel man the pro-Tesla position for a moment.
All right, let's do this.
So
Let's
their
hear this.
position is that, number one, this value is 100% like the true rational investor who thinks that Tesla is worth a lot of money. Maybe not as much as that, but he thinks it's a really good investment. Says that part of this value is based upon projected future income.
Yes.
And that it is getting so much attention for its future that drives its current price up. Because in theory, if you base on economic theories, if we know what a company does over the next year, we will know the price of the stock over the next year.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Like we will know it, because if you and I'm saying, like, if we truly know, there's no room for error. If we know, that's how it works. The second of which is that, to Tesla's credit, their growth in manufacturing capacity does outpace pretty much every single other car company on Earth.
Yep.
They probably need to have a chance of a snowball in hell.
I was literally going to say that.
And then 3 is they're buying into Tesla's forecast.
Yeah.
And before we let's steel man it before we start to poke holes in it, because I'm playing the steel man for them at this point. Tesla has said they're going to have a 50%. They're going to have a 50% growth rate in production over 2021. So if that's true and they're able to maintain that, that justifies part of the Tesla's absurd price rally.
Yeah.
However, do you want to know who sells more electric vehicles than Tesla?
The Chinese company.
Volkswagen does. Not even a Chinese company. Volkswagen beats them.
Volkswagen. Interesting.
Volkswagen.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you can only imagine companies like Toyota and whatnot are going to get in there which have large worldwide footprints. You know, Tesla is still trying to get set up in certain markets.
Tesla,
it's not even a predominant,
guys,
manufacturer anywhere.
Tesla has a major production issue that the entire world is ignoring in their batteries.
I don't think that you're right on that one. That they're ignoring it. I think a lot of people see it and are like, Tesla's fucked.
Okay, mainstream.
I think if you look at
mainstream.
I don't agree. What are you defining as mainstream? Because institutional investors
you're right.
think Tesla's hot garbage.
You're right. Because
they say both that,
Tyler,
and two, Elon can't get away with this shit.
Tyler, you're right. Tyler is right, ladies and gentlemen. No,
hang on. What is the battery issue? I'm sorry.
Go for Boris.
The battery issue
Go for it.
is that this company is literally running on a limited supply of battery because of how they make them. And this is why conspiracy theorists and this and that say that Elon Musk wanted to get into Venezuela. This is why they're opening up new plants and this and that. There's a legit, but beside all of the actual conspiracy theories, there is an issue with the number of batteries and producing the batteries that they have.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
in layman's terms, there's more to it.
Yeah, for a quick engineering lesson for the audience who don't know, creating batteries that can be charged and discharged a lot and have really high capacities is like a super hard challenge.
Yep.
And part of Tesla's sale is we're so great at it, which is not really true.
Yeah, it's a work in progress.
It's an area of innovation we've yet to break through on that front. It's the reason why here in Canada we all kind of smile at the electric car. Great in concept, but on a -20 night, I don't know how well my battery's gonna do.
Yep.
Yeah,
and
if you want to watch Long Way Up with Ewan McGregor, cold and batteries, no go.
Yeah. And there's one
right,
very important element to these batteries. Lithium. So, lithium. That's all I'm going to say. Lithium.
So Boris is alluding to is the fact that almost all batteries require a rare earth metal of some kind.
Yeah.
With lithium being one of the most popular ones right now. And I think there's only I think it's 3 countries produce functionally all of the world's rare earth metals. And one of them's China. And one of them, I'm brain from which African country it is, but an African country that just signed a huge trade deal with China, because China very much is like, we're just going to control all the world's rare earth metals. I know Canada has
a way that they hold a bargaining position.
Zimbabwe.
It's really
Zimbabwe.
about.
Thank you.
It's about being able to mine it efficiently, and that's the challenge, right? Once a country can invest and mine it efficiently, then the gates open up for you. But there's not a lot of countries that take that time to.
Let me frack and tell you how you're going to mine it.
Yeah, I was going to say, a lot of them result in a lot of deaths right now.
Yeah.
It's basically slave labor.
Yeah, it's really bad. And this is why, conspiracy theorists, I don't want to get into it, but this is why they say that the whole Venezuela thing was going down, blah, 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 blah.
Sure.
But lithium, or the materials to make these batteries, is so important in the Tesla model, which is why Mr. Musk may or may not make certain tweets about what's going on in the world.
Fair.
I mean, I think
I think this is a good
Elon Musk
example
is also
of. Sorry, Tyler. I hate talking over people, but.
No worries. Yours is probably more interesting. Mine's just shitting on Elon Musk.
But I was going to say is
Twitter today.
Jesus Christ. It's one of those things where you have to follow the money sometimes. And in this case, you have to follow the elements, because it can tell you so much about the markets and how the markets are going to react. And even in the movie the social network, they made reference. Anyone who knows the weather can know the market, because you know more or less how the world is going to react to certain things. And that is the beauty of the stock markets.
Yes. I think that a lot of this is good coverage. I think it's also worth noting that Tesla is not. Yeah, it's 100% based on the cult of Elon Musk, and it's worth noting that this is my advice to investors, and this comes in part from a place of I don't like Elon Musk at all, but the man has engaged in union-busting behavior. He's pissed off a lot of regulators and a lot of politicians, and he has been fond of skirting various laws.
Yep.
And maybe you think that that's part of his genius, but that puts his company's profitability at risk.
That puts his company at legal risk.
Yeah. Right? Especially when you rely on government credits. But let's say all of a sudden, let's say Biden puts someone who's like competent in the position of labor secretary, and they decide to open an investigation into Tesla about their union busting.
Yep.
All of a sudden you don't get government credits. All of a sudden you have a bunch of fines, and Tesla doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Heavy stuff.
It's a company that can't soak a lot of damage. If we're going to put nerd hat on, in D&D, it is at best a sorcerer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
and there's
fragile.
so much
around damage.
Yeah, there's so much around that. Here's an interesting look at the world and Tesla and what we're trying to tell you about, politically things affect what happens on the markets. If we take a look in 2019, the top 5 lithium producers: Australia with 52.9%, Chile with 21.5%, China with 9.7%, Argentina with 8.3%, and Zimbabwe with 2.1%. Think about that.
Interesting.
Think about Elon Musk. Think about what he said about certain places. And this is kind of like where, the markets become a very interesting place.
Yeah, and then if we expand it beyond just lithium to other rare earth metals, which are currently under exploration, because a lot of research right now suggests that some of them might help solve certain problems with lithium ion and lithium gap batteries. Greenland, a place in the middle of the nowhere in Canada, Brazil in the middle of the jungle.
Yep.
Tanzania, and South Africa.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
And none of those have a lot. All of those are nothing compared to what China has been able to output historically.
Yep. And can we touch on something? Can we touch on something before we move on to the interview and all the fun stuff? Now, Tesla reported record profits, record numbers, but their numbers fell after trading hours. This happens ever so often. And I kind of want to touch on this because I feel like it's important for people to understand that, and this goes back to a previous point where I made where, they made money, but they didn't make enough as analysts thought. And analysts foresee a very, very rocky future. So, food for thought.
Buckle up. For sure. I know it's overvalued.
Something to also remember is Tesla has almost never delivered on a promise.
Exactly.
Or their own internal forecasts. Yeah. They regularly underperform based on their own forecasts.
This is the thing. Coming from the software world, if a software company, if Apple or Microsoft were to do what Tesla does, they would be eaten alive.
Well,
But
let's just remember, though,
they're
putting people in space. They're putting people in space, and they're putting satellites in space. And I think that buys them a lot of forgiveness with the government and whatnot, because there are other contracts. And it's not Tesla, it's SpaceX, it's all these other companies that are spun out of there are doing things that provide them with.
It's the cult of Elon. What we started this bit with. It's the cult of Elon. At the end of the day, Elon Musk as a brand has saved Tesla.
Yeah. So far. Right.
And
right. Quality is starting to slip. More and more they're showing various problems.
Their paint is brutal. There's a lot of consumer end of it.
Because he's got to deliver or he starts losing money.
Door panels not lining up.
And it's also worth noting that, like, the weird part is they cannot keep up to demand.
Yep.
And seem utterly incapable of doing anything about that.
And what makes me like question the markets, and this just goes to show you how, Elon is able to create a brand and is only a brand, is the fact that if any other company delivered the way that Tesla does, they'd be, shat. They'd be shat on.
Yeah.
So
100%. I mean, Elon. I don't understand the allure, but Elon somehow is able to work the markets and social media pretty well.
Because he's got good PR people. He's got good PR people. Like, at the end of the day, he goes on TV in front of cameras, puts on a smile, makes some memeable stuff, and that's that. That's what it comes down to.
Smokes weed with Gwyneth Paltrow for men.
Yep.
I think he's in trouble.
The Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, I don't know. Kia is saying they're going to have a response to everything Tesla has announced by 2027.
There you go.
Yeah.
Like they're saying that Kia is like, we're going to have a comparable model and price point to everything Tesla has announced, not even delivered, announced, and we're going to have it available in your hands by 2027.
Yippers.
Like, that's a move.
And they're owned by Hyundai.
It's also worth noting the new Kia logo. Kind of hot.
Yeah. Yeah. What is it?
Oh, it's like a weird squiggly line thing.
It looks really nice.
It's kind of like has some Mass Effect inspiration to it, and some it's like a really sci-fi.
Nice.
It's good.
No,
I've always liked that company. A lot of my car is made up of their car.
Mass Effect. That's something we're going to talk about at the news episode. So if you want to hear our thoughts on Mass Effect and how that company is doing what they're doing, listen to our news show this weekend.
Yeah.
It's going to be legendary.
Yeah.
And just a primer for the interview we're going to roll into. Something that I notice is getting overlooked on a lot of the news reporting this week in the GameStop stuff and the analysis that's being pushed out there is they're not really mentioning that the stock itself for GameStop was shorted beyond 100%. So that's not being reported too regularly, and that put these hedge fund companies and whatnot into a very vulnerable position.
Yep.
Because it was shorted at 120 to 160%. The analytics are a little all over the place.
Yep.
Tyler's probably gathering it up right now. But it's something that gets overlooked when we look at a lot of focus on the Reddit meme, Gamestonk stuff. But it's really important to know that a lot of people just looked at the situation and were able to make a pretty straightforward bet that if somebody's borrowing money to buy stock, and they're doing it in such a way to really shit on that company, guess what? It's going to bounce.
But you know what's funny, Phil?
Bounce if we
you
call it
literally, and I know you did this on purpose, but you literally just explained what shorting is.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. For me, for me, it's just unreal how shorting is humanly legal and possible. Not only are you borrowing stocks that don't exist, but you are
do
making
exist.
money. Sorry?
They do exist.
Okay,
do exist.
yes. Okay.
You have to actually borrow the stock from someone.
Yes,
And part
okay.
of the
It's the financing behind it that isn't necessarily there until after the fact.
Yeah, so the counter is, if I'm lending you my stock, I can call it back at any time, and then you eat shit on the difference. And a lot of the time, we didn't see it as much in GameSpot because of the nature of it, but it happens sometimes that one hedge fund
Can a
will
retail
call the
investor
bluff
do this?
of another hedge fund.
Can a
Well, no, because
retail
retail
investor
doesn't
do
hold
this?
enough.
That's
Do
what I mean.
Short?
Yeah.
Yes. I can short stuff all the time.
Yeah, you do it by your action.
No. I have my trading
Oh yeah,
brokerage
because
open right here.
yeah, you get their
Okay,
benefits
yeah.
and you can make your play. But in the Robinhood sense, all right, I think this is where Boris was going. Like Robinhood got caught in a capital crunch, according to them. Right?
Sure.
They said that they were in a position where they because of the regulations in the states, which are different than the regulations we're going to discuss.
Yep.
The Canadian laws. All right, and we discussed that in the interview. But it's in the states, you're actually not allowed to trade the money of the person who paid you. You have to finance that money or have that capital somehow otherwise secured. So you can't take the money from Robinhood that the trader just gave you and put that money and say, do this, do that. They have to hold it for 2 days. So they got caught in a 2-day bubble where they're saying,
Oh, yeah.
we just didn't have the billions of dollars because of the amount of volume that went on and how much growth there was. We didn't have enough money to pay the government control. Like,
Yeah.
we
They
didn't have enough
they
finance.
should have stopped you people from signing on.
But they would let you sell it off, but they wouldn't let you buy it. So
No, that's 100% a problem. But the question was whether or not shorting is legal and whether or not it should be. And I'm like, yes, but
know.
the other
Okay,
side of it is
but-
like
Okay.
Melvin should have gotten called much earlier.
Tyler,
Yeah.
here's the thing.
they shouldn't be allowed to
Shorting.
go over 100%.
Shorting could and should be legal, but
Yep.
where does it turn illegal? Where if I'm the one in charge, hold on, a better example, because if I'm the one doing it, it's fucking illegal. But if you bought a shitload of funds, you tell me I bought, or that you got these shares, so then I write an article, or I go on a something tirade and say this is overvalued.
Sure.
Then what?
I mean,
That's
so what
market
it's supposed to be-
manipulation.
what it's supposed to be, no.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
there is market manipulation that is legal and market manipulation that is illegal.
yeah.
And what it is if, because Kramer is the great example. Because
Yes.
Kramer fucked a lot of people in 2008 because he was just spouting off.
Yep.
And the defense was, you have no obligation to believe the shit he's saying.
Yes.
And the issue becomes, how do we regulate that? And even if I agree with you morally that Kramer is, for at least in 2008, was a reprehensible human being with some of the shit he said to do, and how much he looked like he was very much profiting off of lying to people, I am more comfortable regulating whether or not news, which we should have like a framework for, is allowed to lie, versus whether or not I can say I think something is worthwhile.
And this is where
100%. We get in a
and
really
this
weird
is where
position then.
security security watchdogs, like SEC and others, and I know we get into this in our interview, but fundamentally where they have to set the rules, and certain companies have to follow the rules of disclosure in order to ensure that this isn't illegal. That's what I was getting at. Like, there's certain rules
100%.
put in place, and with certain rules put in place, there are ways to skirt around said rules. And I'm not saying to skirt around them, but it's the reality of the world that we live in, guys.
Yep. People find
Well, and the other side being, and we touched on this briefly in the interview, and it's not like the focus, but like this not the CRA, the SEC, and really almost every country on Earth they got tugboats going up against battleships when it looks at them trying to take down hedge funds or major institutional investors. And that's a problem. Like, I'd get on side for that, but I think that's a better, like, we have a lot of good rules in place. Yes. But if no one's doing shit with them, they don't mean a goddamn thing.
It's no one's doing anything with them, or the fines don't matter. If you're telling me that I make $2 billion and you're going to slap a $2,000 regulatory fine on me, then what's the point?
I qualify that under it's not doing a goddamn thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the frustration that's getting to people right now, because it's like, well, what are the regulations there for if they're meaningless, if they're not enforceable, if they're not, going to actually do any damage?
With all of that
this
said,
might be a good thing to end on.
Yes, Tyler, go, please go.
I was going to say, I know what they're there for. They're there for a political card for the two political parties in the United States to trade back and forth to ensure that they're getting their own financing. Because although I am probably more left than either American party, they're both two of the most corrupt. I think there's like two of the most corrupt, fucked up political parties in the Western world. And that being said, one is definitely better than the other. It's not a competition. One is very obviously not demons.
I think that this is a perfect segue, my gentlemen, into our interview. Tyler, can you throw the baseball into this interview? Thank you so much.
And now, Ian. We've got a guest in the show. In the interest of disclosure, I did go to high school with him. I've known him for more than a decade. But I'm going to toss it to you to introduce yourself, Ian.
Hi, I'm Ian Literovich. I'm a securities litigator at Morganti & Company. We're a law firm that prosecutes class actions on behalf of investors in Canada. Mostly that has to do with claims for what are called misrepresentations. We might get to that. But basically when people feel like they've been lied to by the companies they've invested in and want to get together and sue them, we represent those folks.
So for the listener who may not know as much about it, when you say investing here, is that just handling shares, or is that handling all sorts of other derivatives and similar options as well?
It can involve a lot of different types of securities. We usually refer to securities writ large, and then whatever the damages are that we calculate, it's based on warrants, on units, on a variety. It runs the gamut, depending on the class we define.
Yeah, so this is all coming up in light of a number of different weird stock things this week, primarily GameStop. What's your quick take on it? And we'll delve into it.
I think that it's an interesting experience because it demonstrates the problems with market valuation that exist. There are fundamentals to the company that were identified on the Reddit forum Wall Street Bets, saying this company actually looks like it's going to be turning a corner. It's got a new CEO, it's got a new business plan. The market has it currently undervalued. Some of the first investing, and it wasn't just Wall Street Bets, that was other retail investors saw this, heard about it on forums. In Canada, for example, we have Stockhouse, we have a couple of other different investor-based forums where people will talk about what information they have or opinions they have. And the price you'd expect it to go up and up and up. Sometimes happens in these situations is a hedge fund or a market maker, as we call them, large institutional investor has a disproportionate impact on the share price because they are able to leverage a massive buy or a massive sell. And so what they did is they determined that if GameStop's stock went down, they stood to make a lot of money if they what's called shorted the stock, which is basically you buy the ability to sell the stock later. If right, when the stock goes down, you sell the stock for a higher value and you make money that way. Mm-hmm. Stock continues to go up, you are forced to buy stock in order to pay for your position, which means you lose money. So it's one of the few times in which a company going in the wrong direction, as you might say, makes you money. Mm-hmm. Being sort of too loquacious on this point.
No,
it's just
this is great.
This is perfect.
The issue is basically that a hedge fund and the sort of where the conversation then turns to the nature of market manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
The that was levied on Wall Street bets is you all got together and acted in a certain sense like a price-fixing cartel. You've modified the nature of this company's stock price in a way that is probably offside with what we'd expect from securities law, however you want to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
What people in Wall Street bets say is, we just came out in the open and shared opinions and suggested that we keep this thing going.
Mm-hmm.
You, hedge funds, do this all the time. You just call them ideas lunches, and you make sure that you meet. And briefly, I should mention that my firm prosecutes securities class actions, but we also deal in some competition class actions and antitrust litigation. And when you look into the evidence that sort of comes from those, there are a lot of lunches and drinks and meetings where it's not over email, but people together and they'll decide like, hey, it would make my life a little bit easier if you could do these things, and then the hedge funds kind of get together and let that all happen.
Yeah, so it is very much like that scene from The Big Short where they're at the bar and they're talking about whether or not this stock or that stock is bullshit.
Sometimes it's actually extremely explicit. In the LIBOR scandal years ago, there were emails traded between firms saying, hey, I have a position in this. I need it to stay in a certain range. Can you help me out?
Yeah.
And large institutional investors would move money around to make that happen.
So was that, again, for the audience that may not be as knowledgeable of this, was that found to be bad, basically?
That was absolutely found to be bad.
Okay.
And yeah, so and that's sort of a quintessential case of price fixing in the investing market. Specifics of LIBOR enough to get really into the weeds on that specific case. I know that concept and how it went down there, and it fits with class actions that I have been involved in that are antitrust class actions about, for example, drug price fixing. This came up a few years ago, but it's the exact same situation where people would subtly get together in Washington. They all happened to be at the same restaurant, and then the next day, doxycycline went up in price by 100% across the board.
Wow.
That kind of handshake arrangement, as opposed to Wall Street bets, which is people just and suggesting that the company's fundamentals are good. Don't let the hedge funds destroy it.
Okay, so I got two direct follow-up questions to delve into that a little bit more. The first is, some people in Wall Street bets are arguing that by nature of it being on a public forum, that makes it an inherent difference in kind. Without giving because you can't give legal advice to people or anything like that. But do you think that holds any water? Do you think that is a thing the courts might found reasonable, or are they just going to throw that out of hand?
I remember that Wall Street bets right now is getting a lot of press because you're now seeing people. The investing public has always congregated and shared tips. Problems only really come with when the company gets involved. If Gamestop selectively went to people in a private forum to tell them that certain good things were going to happen, that would be problematic under the Ontario Securities Act or under the various securities regulatory regimes we have in Canada and the United States as well. But to talk about a stock is not only okay, in fact, that's the way that you arrive at the most efficient price allocation, because you have people sharing their understanding of where the price should be, which helps efficiency in the market.
Okay. And then there's a Jim Cramer video from about 2006 that's being shared around again, where he talks about taking specific actions because he had holdings that, the market needed to go in a certain direction for him to make money. And he would then do other things to help make that happen. So is for the hedge fund position, is that the part of regular doing business? And is that the kind of thing the SEC or any institution is at all concerned about?
So I could get myself in a little bit of not actual trouble, but I'll just go for it because I think everybody who's in this space thinks this way. The regulators are consistently outgunned. What you're saying is true on both ends. It is something that the regulator is concerned about. It is something that they have never been effective at changing. And I can speak in the Ontario context specifically, across Canada as well. The reason that we have a specific cause of action where an investor can sue a company for having misled them and can get together class action based on that, was in part built around the idea that the Ontario Securities Commission, which is the regulator here, didn't seem to be able to have an effect on the market and making bad behavior go away. And so therefore, when you talk about some of these securities class actions, the Valiant Pharmaceuticals case is a great example. That recently settled, and the full-on amount paid by Valiant and its and PricewaterhouseCoopers, its auditor, totaled, I think, $117 million. It was a settlement where the damages were in the billions.
Wow.
But the company was actually forced to pay more than, an SEC fine, or more than, and that's sort of the situation where the only way that a lot of these places get redress is by private action, because of the fact the regulator doesn't want to happen, but just doesn't have the ability to follow up and really take a bite out of these companies in the way that some of these larger private actions do.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that helps talk about the backstory a bit. And I want to delve a bit more into the specifics of the GameStop, Robinhood, Citadel, Melvin fiasco. But Boris and Phil, did you want to jump into anything? Will I grab a quick factoid?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that, taking a step back, the entire concept of shorting, essentially at the core of it is you have a hedge fund borrowing money for the short, right? Like they're actually not really putting up anything that they own per se. They're borrowing the positions and then kind of making money off of the difference. How is this legal? How is this possible? Like, I can't go and borrow positions as a normal person, can I?
Well, so there's two ways of looking at it. What I'm referring to is when you have a leveraged acquisition, which is that you are borrowing money in order to obtain your position, which is an extremely risky thing that, generally speaking, your financial advisor will waive you off of, in part because that's kind of what caused the Great Depression.
Yeah.
No, sort of for financial market, well, for people, obviously, but in the ability to short just in general, there's actually benefits to it. There are companies that are overvalued, and it speaks again to that idea of valuation in the market tends to not be quite accurate. The sort of example I give is that the stock market at its best and Wall Street at its best assigns value. And that value is useful because if you have a company like Boeing, for example, and you say, this is a company that manufactures a certain number of planes of a certain quality, we want to be able to sort of assess how much is that company worth. Or if you, I was thinking Cargill Grain, although I think they're actually private, but, or an agricultural company. They produce this much wheat, this much agricultural product, which feeds this many people. Collectively, we can value that. We have a sense of what that should be worth. They're overvalued. For example, when the Boeing Max went down, Max fiasco went down, it's inappropriate that Boeing's stock price went down because its value as a company was diminished by the fact that they were not able to produce planes and they had to fix them, and there's all these issues. And so if you were to short, having heard that, that there were these problems, that would be the market efficiently correcting the price of Boeing. It really arises from that sort of, conspiratorial is perhaps strong because, alleged conspiracy has a bunch of legal requirements. Mm-hmm. But when these places get together and try to not the stock price back down to earth and back down to an appropriate level, but try to tank it and torpedo it,
right?
That run into some problems, and that's when you see companies issuing press releases, sort of trying to correct. See from short seller reports claiming problems.
Mm-hmm. I just want to, for a good point of clarification as well. From my understanding, I'm just going to get Ian to verify me as our expert of the week, is there's a difference between naked shorting, which is when you're selling something and you have nothing to cover that position other than hope and money, versus covered shorting, which is you would short a position and then you'd either buy a call or a put or some other instrument to help limit your exposure. So you can use it to create more complex solutions, and in some way it's a building block that helps you build a bigger position.
Yeah, Tyler's absolutely right. And I should say that my expertise is much more in terms of the legal framework rather than the actual investing structure. However, I will tell you that because I'm a lawyer and because I therefore get access to insider information, I obviously cannot trade shares in any company in which I'm involved in litigation for a variety of ethical reasons.
Yep.
But I actually had a conversation once with someone who's, in my firm, and we were sort of talking about, this insider information and the fact that places, you'll see this, we will have a class period that will start at a certain time because they announced bad information that they had not been telling the market. And if you look at the share price data and you look at the actual stock data, you'll see that there's a giant volume of shares traded the day before. I'm not going to refer to any individual case because I shouldn't. Well, I can't allege fraud unless I can prove. But I can say that there are times in which you're like, oh, okay, so the day before you told the market that there's no gold in them hills, or there's various problems, all of your options were exercised, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah,
and then some people from Wall Street Bets have built on that and said that itself becomes an indicator of company performance.
Sorry, I need some clarification on that.
No, yeah, so it's become part of the meme of the Wall Street Bets and the larger community of some people have now started to point at when CEOs start exercising a lot of options and that before any announcement, that's starting to become part of disclosure they're alleging.
Well, so that's
not proper disclosure. Yeah, it's not proper disclosure, but they're starting to work to bring that into their decision making.
An interesting point about disclosure requirements writ large, which is that the market is efficient when there are proper disclosures, and there are legal requirements to every quarter produce what's called a management discussion and analysis, or an MD&A, alongside your quarterly financial results. And you have to disclose everything that has a material impact on your business and how it has changed in the last quarter. And if you don't, you are exposed to liability under the Securities Act. Like, anytime you issue any press release or you discuss any nature of your business, you are required by law to produce enough information to make it not a misrepresentation. So what do I mean by that? If you comment on, we're constructing this project, and you mention that it's behind schedule, that could be a misrepresentation. And so when you talk about these sort of disclosure requirements, and then going back to the hedge funds issue that comes out of this is when people have information that they share with each other, but they don't share with the broader market. And that happens time and time again, and it's referred to as selective disclosure and is also prohibited.
Awesome. So the allegations that are going around right now, which are to the nature of Melvin and a few others have closed their positions, according to allegedly a series of advertisements, and then some market analysts are saying that's just not true. That could be a problem, is what we're saying then.
It can be a even bigger problem. First of all, it runs afoul of the selective disclosure issue I mentioned. But secondly, there is now a case law in Canada as of a few years ago that refers to what are called storm warnings. And that's the term that's been used in the United States for a very long time. And what it really means is if you see certain bad omens, for example, a CEO getting fired, constitutes a storm warning that will lead investors to liquidate their position and will actually constitute what's called a partial correction to misrepresentations that you've made in the past.
Interesting.
Say that, if you have been in bad financial shape and you fire your CEO, the class period for any potential class action will actually now start on the day you fired your CEO and won't start necessarily on the day when you finally tell the market about all the terrible things you did.
Okay, interesting.
Even if your stock price, and that sort of gives you an opportunity to decide how you want to plead your case. And if the stock price actually, if depending on where the share price is and how much the damages are, you might actually choose to go earlier in your class period and say, no, when you fired the CEO, we're going to sue based on that. Because that's the point in which you told people who know what they're looking for to get out of the market.
Awesome. So let's get down to the specifics. And one of the big allegations that we're starting to see is that Robinhood, who is a broker, which means that they allow an individual to buy and sell shares in other market securities, is allegedly hiding stocks, limiting transaction amounts, and or exercising people's options or liquidating people's options without their consent.
So I'm just going to say I'm a little bit hesitant to specifically comment on what an individual entity has done.
Yeah, of course.
The legality of it. That disclaimer notwithstanding, what you have described, and especially exercising on other people's behalf, is clearly problematic. And the fact that Robinhood is meant to be a forum that simply transacts business, but is now tipping the scales, runs its own issues. And it's in fact for these reasons that you've seen alternative exchanges pop up in an attempt to avoid front running or some of the disclosure or sort of issues that you described, is because people are fed up with being controlled.
Yeah. So,
but that said, yes.
Yeah, roughly, it's a bad look. So tying that to disclosure, we did have Vlad Tenev, the CEO of Robinhood, go on CNBC after a day of trading when all this activity allegedly began, and he kind of said, like, oh, this is all because Robinhood couldn't support, like, if something went wrong, we financially were liable, and we didn't have the bank to do it. So, without going into the specifics of this, if an action happens, and then the CEO kind of backfills why, can that be the kind of thing that kind of trips those disclosure concerns?
Thinking about that because it's an interesting question. The disclosure requirements on a situation like this would be CEO, when commenting on the decision being made, would need to disclose the entirety of that process. CEO omitted a discussion of that, looking a partial discussion of the reasoning. That could be a disclosure issue. The difficulty is to determine disclosure of the reasoning affects the actual action.
Yeah.
Action is what will cause damage to an individual investor or to a class of investors. Now, it can all be is all relevant and would be very prejudicial to any position that Robinhood or a similar entity would take if they ever got into litigation, because it would be indicative, I was going to say ex post facto, of justifying after the fact actions that they already took.
Yeah.
That's sort of a situation where the issue is, again, about color more than a specific cause of action to come out of that.
Yeah. Well, and we don't want to get you in any trouble over commenting on these specifics. We're just in a very weird time. I think there's value you provide kind of what guidance you can to people. So I want to go into like a really weird direction with it for a second, because there's a new meme going around, which is that this should be treated as though it was a, quote, democratic hedge fund. So they're arguing that all these people happening to like discuss information and then collectively make these decisions of where their stocks are or are not going to go should be considered to be kind of a democratic hedge fund, or like a hedge fund that is also a co-op of all the investors. Do you think that that has any sort of legal weight or consideration at all? Is it a thing you've ever heard of? Or is it just, that sounds like a cartel with extra steps?
The reason that cartels are illegal, and I'm thinking of something that Adam Smith wrote in Wealth of Nations, that people who seldom trade, seldom meet, even for merriment or diversion, but the conversation always ends in a conspiracy against the public or a contrivance to raise prices. Is that those people he was talking about were meeting at a pub in 1776 and then figuring out what to do with price fixing. The strength that Wall Street Bets has on its side is it all happened out loud. I go yell in the town square, I don't think apples should cost as much as they do. And everybody got together and said, yeah, we're not going to buy apples until they cost less. Action. That's not, that's just the market setting prices. That's equilibrium being arrived at via supply and demand. And so I will confess that I've not heard the term democratic hedge fund or co-op hedge fund before, which is just a great confluence of pure unbridled capitalism. And
it's why it had to be brought up, was I saw this doing the meme of like, we should like make this official, and I was like, we gotta get someone that can talk about this.
So, I mean, and the other thing we should keep in mind is that, as far as securities laws are concerned, there are certain regulations that are specific to investment banks and entities like that. But when it comes to individual investors, the concerns are more about trying to speak to the general case rather than trying to format you into a category. People go online, and one thing I don't want to again give legal advice, but if you go online and you start talking to people in a public forum about what you think should happen with something, you don't have insider information. The effects that you have on the share price are because of your own transactions that you are doing, as I say, out loud in front of other people. And that's completely fine. And, and this is sort of the irony, it's actually the type of pure form capitalism that a lot of these hedge funds would purport to support, because it is people actually trying to affect the market by setting prices towards an equilibrium that they believe exists. The problem that hedge funds have is they used to just do that for them. And on an unrelated note, that wasn't unrelated, they made a ton of money off of it. And yeah, we've seen these happen in years past too. I mean, they're one of the great allegations in the 1997 financial crisis was that hedge funds specifically targeted the value of Asian currencies in order to, and this is, in a theoretical sense, in order to drive them down and force privatizations. Now, that's a much larger topic to get into, but the point is just to say that hedge funds have disproportionate market power and are now sort of irritated that people are exercising market power that they used to clandestinely.
That's been one of the major themes that I've been picking up off of a lot of the financial news things is you have a real resistance by some of the people who are saying we don't like this change because we can't drive it. This is really the way it comes off to me, the average lay guy, right? It's just like, what's happening?
Yeah, it's a problem that, it exists anytime I think you have a institution that is a market maker and is now forced to relate itself to the demands of investors. And this has actually happened, incidentally, we've had this come up in class actions involving ESG factors, as they're called, which is basically social governance concerns, when investors and large institutional investors will now place value on, what's your supply chain look like? Are you making sure you don't use child labor? Are you making sure that you have all these different things that we care about? And there's a famous case in the United States of involving the Dodge brothers, Dodge and Ford, back in the 1920s, where the original concept was, no, you only owe money to your shareholders. That's all you care about. You have to make money. Shareholders are saying, well, we actually care about some other stuff too. And there's been a lot of pushback because in general, funds and financial institutions don't want to modify the way they do business. They would prefer to focus exclusively on shareholder value as defined through that fairly narrow lens. And on an unrelated note, again, shareholder value means that they get commissions and certain benefits.
Yeah. I want to jump back for a second just to get a quick thing hammered out for the audience that may not know. So when you're saying, if I talk in a public square, if I go out in the street and start yelling about Apple prices, that's fine and dandy. It appears when a personality goes on television, that's fine and dandy. What is it? Is it different or not if an individual goes somewhere that is behind a paywall? So, for example, I set up Tyler's mailing list, and it's $10 a month, and I talk to CEOs, and who knows if you get better investment advice out of that or not. Does that qualify as this public option or not? Or this public discussion, is that part of making the market?
I think what you've described here is a method by which you created a private forum with a separate selective disclosure situation in which you're hoping to glean information from executives at companies. That's afoul of the Securities Act specifically price fixing generally, and I would have to double check, but I think you might be running afoul of the Competition Act, at least in Canada, because again, you're talking about certain price fixing that you'd be doing. If the question is sort of, am I allowed to go and privately speak to people who I think around? Fine, as long as you're not getting insider information.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, go for it. No, go for it.
Go ahead.
I just want to draw the comparison between what is different then about a company like Bloomberg that has a periodical that ostensibly is giving you information you can't get anywhere else. And, you know, competition may make it such that you can get that information or analogous elsewhere, but you have to pay to get. Like, why is that? How is that different, I guess, is what the question is.
Well, I think that there's also a sort of X factor that comes from your ability to clandestinely share information that moves the price versus what I think you've described as still public information. It's behind a paywall, but that information can get out and is accessible. Yeah. If I meet someone for coffee instead, there's no record of it, and I'm talking about, you know, I think a good quarter, agree on that, you personally can make a lot of money because we have control over $1 billion in assets.
Yeah.
That's different altogether.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to get that. Yeah, go for it.
When I talk about disclosure obligations, though, generally speaking, those are disclosure obligations I'm discussing in the context of information that the company puts out. And that can go sideways too. I've seen instances in which there are private Facebook groups for investors in a company, and executives in the company will pop into the group and say, like, you know, hey, heads up, certain good things are happening. And I see that cringe because I'm thinking, if you're saying it here, you have to say it, well, it's called CDAR. You have to say it publicly. You have to say it on the system that Canada has constructed for letting people know.
Yeah. So, but if a CEO, for example, set up an automated process that went around CDAR and their Facebook group at the same time, they'd be okay.
Yeah, as long as it went to everyone. That's the issue. But again, it comes back to the sort of broader principle. The principle of securities regulation is investor protection. That's the reason it exists, is to make sure that you don't get hosed. That's the reason why the Securities Act of 1933 exists in the U.S. And this is why the legal framework has been developed the way it is you want to give investors as much information as possible, because the only way that you get a well-run market is by providing them all information, even if it's good or bad, in basically an attempt to avoid snake oil salesmen. And when you sort of think about that as the guiding light behind these things, I think it kind of helps to understand the disclosure obligations and how you can stay on side of them.
Okay. So we had a conversation before recording where you mentioned the general transition in the market, in that you said that we used to have a certain level of retail investors as kind of a percentage of the market, and that's increased significantly.
It has. I would have to double check my numbers. My understanding, I believe it was that retail investors constitute something like 10% of the market 15 years ago, and is now more like 25% of the market. So an explosion in the number of retail. Actually, without using those, let's just put it this way: there has been a substantial increase in the proportion of the market that is represented by retail investors.
So retail investors are someone like me, Boris, Phil, you, going out there and just buying stocks, even directly, like, yeah, if we're just going on interactive brokers or whatever, and I'm buying stocks, I'm a retail investor.
Exactly. And I should say that because I work in the class action space, I speak to class members. My contact information is given when we give notices to the class, and I get calls. And it's quite often that they are just, there's a guy who's a pipe fitter and looked at a stock, saw some good things were happening, wanted to make money off of it. And they'll call in from all across Canada, and it's occasionally the case that I'll get a call from an institutional investor, but the disproportionate number of calls I get and emails I get are from people who, you know, they were wanting to save for retirement, they wanted to, you know, make money day trading, and that is a substantial portion of the market, in a way I think maybe people don't realize when we talk about Wall Street and the way that the market behaves.
Do you think, and this is not trying to bind you to anything, just kind of your general feeling, your gut on the matter, do you think that is in part driven by COVID in the last 2 years of it? Do you think that's helping to continue to drive that trend?
I think there's a few inputs, and these are not me speaking on the legal basis, but just my own sort of having watched the market and things. I think there's a few parts to it. COVID is definitely part of it. I think the other issue that has sort of developed a attempt, at least when I speak to class members, there's an attempt that people have made to leverage investments in order to make up for stagnant wages. Mm-hmm. The pitch that sometimes happens is, investments are how you make your real money, because you can see, if you look at Wall Street, they seem to be doing great. And so you'll have people say, like, if I just nail it on one, one investment, and I'm thinking specifically Dell, the computer company, when it was first getting off the ground, there were people in Austin who invested in it, and they referred to as Dellionaires, because they got in on the ground floor, it went crazy big, and they all had these giant homes, and they were just sort of rando Calrissians.
Yeah.
So for a lot of people, you look at the situation where you got out of school, you have a lot of student debt, housing prices are crazy, and you think to yourself, well, it's not like I'm going to get to where I want to get to if I work 40 hours a week doing me. I got to figure out some other way of getting this money, and that sometimes comes from investments. Which is why, and I'm speaking personally here, I find it sort of heartbreaking sometimes when I see malfeasance and misfeasance in the market that is specifically targeting these people. And I've seen instances in which, well, that'd be too specific. It'd be your list be able to figure that one out. But instances which, for example, a company is referred to working on a cure for COVID, and their stock price shot up.
Sure.
It doubled. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're saying that because you're trying to pump the stock up so you can exercise options, and then you're going to dump it, and you're going to leave these people holding the bag. And sure enough, the share price fell off the wagon right after that.
Yeah. So just to confirm that people are falling if they're a little less, on the ball with this. So the institutional investors don't tend to fall for that kind of thing. It's more like the retail investor at home.
No, and that's the thing. Especially there will be times when you read press releases. I referred earlier to storm warnings, and in Canada actually allows you to distinguish and delineate between people with expertise in the market and people without expertise in the market in terms of how they react to information and news in the market. And so I mentioned the idea of a CEO being fired. Investors know it's time to get out of here. If you're leaving abruptly, like in the case I'm thinking of, if your listeners want to look it up, it's Kauf and Colt Resources. But anyway, the case I'm thinking of, the CEO bailed right after an investigation was launched into misappropriation of funds. Now, there wasn't disclosure saying that the funds were gone, that the company was dying or anything like this. It was just, this person is no longer going to be working with us, and instead we're excited to announce a new CEO coming on the scene. So institutional investors bailed. Other people sort of say, like, oh, that's weird, but okay, management shuffle, fine. I know there's capital shuffles sometimes, so maybe that's the same thing. And then, fast forward a few months, and it's like, yeah, okay, all the money's gone. We have no more money.
Yeah.
It's just gone. Yeah. And so there's that sort of delineation between the retail and the institutional that even in law we acknowledge that if you need to have the best information you can to make those decisions, because sometimes you don't know how to read between the lines.
Yeah. So to tie to that, and to tie a little bit to the larger sentiment we're seeing, is there's becoming this weird political discussion, and it seems to be happening more in the States than Canada a little bit, about what, if anything, should be done about this, kind of at a legislative level. And it seems to be not so much hit by the party politics that we've seen kind of in general, but we are kind of seeing this one group kind of go like, no, this is the market operating as it should. You did a naked short, play stupid games with stupid prizes. How do you personally like feel about that, and then comparing it to 2008, which is becoming like a big comparator point, with some people kind of explicitly branding this as the revenge for 2008.
Right. So there's sort of a couple of points. One is to sort of say, we're always shenanigans, even under the current legal regime. I'm reminded of, the economics student who's given a problem saying there's problems with crime in this community. What steps do you economically take to remove that problem? And they said, we made crime illegal. It's a bit of a similar thing. It's sort of saying, there has been market manipulation. What do we? Well, you make market manipulation illegal, which it already is. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the first instinct to say is that it's about actually applying laws that exist, and allowing sort of for an investor-focused mindset. The revenge for 2008, or is this the way the market is supposed to act and adapt to these kinds of situations? Since it is a catharsis to see that hedge funds engaging in naked shorts are what they're experiencing, especially when so many people were foreclosed on in 2008. Mm-hmm. And not forget that the 2008 ripple effect went well beyond just the housing market. I mean, the fact that interest rates shot way up are in no small part what led to the Eurozone crisis that followed immediately then after. Yeah, because all these countries that had been paying X percent for their treasury bonds or for the bonds issued by their various central governments, I should say, we're now having to pay at a much inflated rate. And to put further historical context, it is exactly that type of movement in interest rates and difficulties that come from financial malfeasance that in a large way led to financial crisis in Latin America in the 80s. It was interest rates shot up in an attempt to deal with stagflation in the United States, which is to say that the economy was not growing, but inflation was very high. And it meant that countries across Latin America had to default on loans because suddenly the money that they owed to American banks was had to be paid at a much higher rate. Anyway, all this to say that, there are these disproportionate knock-on effects that financial markets have on much more than just a hedge fund that is being harmed. Yeah. And, if you periodically force them to touch the hot stove, there is benefit of getting them to actually maybe remember that there are stoves that are hot. Yeah. And it's bad. So I think in sort of there's a two-pronged issue there, which is one, should there be legislative change? Depends on the exercise of the Securities Act. In terms of what new legislation is required, before I commented more fully on it, but the instinct I have is it's an enforcement issue more than anything else. Yeah. And on the second point, it's more lines of like, yes, absolutely, market corrections like this are healthy if they actually force larger institutional actors to take these threats seriously and try to actually value stocks at the right place.
So there was a report not too long ago, but it basically said that for every dollar that gets invested into the IRS, and a lot of my data is American because that's what we've been reading into it now, but basically there was a report that said something along the lines of, for every dollar that we put into IRS funding, the American government gets $6 back in terms of just they're better able to enforce the rules that are already in place. So your position is that, something along the lines of that enforcement mechanism, that proper funding for the SEC or the Canadian equivalent is going to be probably more important than any actual changing of the guard in terms of, figureheads in charge of the institutions and or changing rules that aren't going to be enforced anyways.
I mean, I can do you one better. So you mentioned the Canadian regulators, and just for your audience to understand briefly, I'll refer to the Ontario Securities Commission. That's not me referring to just because I'm Toronto and I'm in the center of the universe. It's because every individual province in Canada has a different securities regulator. All of the securities acts across Canada are very similar to each other, and there are periodically calls for a unified Canadian regulator. But while the United States has the SEC, we don't have an equivalent. Anyway, that being said, just as a bit of background, money spent on the enforcement division of the Securities Commission, which actually goes and gets money back from fraud or malfeasance, is the best investment outside perhaps of the CRA that we make, like society, in terms of return on amount spent. And I mean, the Securities Commission Enforcement Branch, I believe, and I would have to double check this, actually makes money. So we fund it, but because the enforcement means that fines come in, like it's a net gain, despite the fact they're ostensibly. I mean, if I were to tell you that the NYPD made money every year, you sort of think like, that's odd. Yeah. At the very least.
At least like we can look at. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that'd be a very different sort of, you wonder where that money's coming from.
Yeah. But it's similar to how USPIS, the United States Postal Service, used to be a net gain as well. Like, it used to make money.
And enforcement of these things, and I should say the other sort of, there are these large class actions that get started when there's corporate malfeasance or misfeasance. And part of the reason these things exist is because lawyers will take on, when it's a class action like that, they'll take on a contingency fee, which creates a financial incentive to go after every company that does these bad things, because you're getting some piece of the overall settlement or the overall trial judgment as it happens. And in the United States, where this has been existing for much longer than in Canada, there's a class action against Vivendi Universal, in which I believe the jury award was $2 billion. And so when you talk about sort of return on investment and incentivizing people policing the markets, that sort of incentivization and putting it in the hands of private practice to go after these things does have some effect on the market and actually changing behavior.
So yeah, it seems to be that the instance where a private or semi-private kind of option there seems to be helping.
Right.
So, just to get a little bit of extra on that for the audience, how does that, like, because you're a class action, how does that affect, let's say I bought one share in this company and then malfeasance happened. So just to like really put a pin in it for the audience, like, what does that mean for that individual?
In terms of the class action?
Yeah. So,
to be as brief as possible, because these things can get a little spin out if I let them. There's basically two stages. There's certification, which is if you're going to be a class action, you have to get the court to let you be a class action. There's a 5-part test I won't go through, but basically you have to can be dealt with on a common basis. There have to be what are called common issues. An identifiable class, a cause of action. There's a few check marks or boxes to check off. At which point, if you're an investor, you will get a notice online or even in the mail. You'll get it through a brokerage firm sometimes, telling you there is a class action. To at that point, you can opt out. You're in it. And if action has settled, you will have the certification first, and then you will have to get actual court approval of the settlement. Because the court steps in and says, like, whoa. You're speaking on behalf of a lot of people here. Did you do the best you could? Yeah. And it's not a rubber stamp. Settlements have been rejected by the courts.
Okay.
At that point, if you're an individual person, you will have gotten a notice first telling you that you are a class member. Will be able to either object to the settlement or opt out of it entirely. There's then the approval hearing where you are allowed to come and speak and say, this thing is garbage, please don't do it, or this thing is great, please give me money. And then a claims process in which you will fill out a claim form online, or there'll be some system that will be set up with what's called a claims administrator, and whatever amount of money was obtained will be sort of sent out to you. The quick and dirty of it in the procedure of a class action. I mean, of course, the first part of that is actually like issuing a claim.
Yeah, you're going through the full lawsuit. I just meant like so the individual gets, like, assuming they opt all the way in and they get represented by you as part of this class, they are getting money out of it, or they're getting whatever comes at some prorated percentage.
It works. It's usually, and I just want to be very clear. They don't opt in. It's opt out system.
Yeah, they don't opt out,
because I want to declare that. Yeah, if they don't opt out and are in the class, they will get a pro rata amount of distribution in accordance with what's called a plan of allocation. That system needs to be approved by the court, but it can actually change. Sometimes situations in which you sort of say, like, okay, if we were to actually just do a straight shot, everybody gets, whatever. You look at how big their position is, and however big your position is, you get a portion of your damages based on that. There's sometimes that gets wonky, so you're allowed to mess around with that. That's the basis of it.
Awesome.
Yeah. So let's take a step back. And the reason for that is I know a lot of people listening are watching the news, seeing what's going on, seeing people make money. And there's a lot of people now interested in the markets. There's a lot of people who say, hey, I can do this too. So I think over the next few weeks, months, possibly years, we're going to be seeing a lot more retail investors. You know, the average Joe going in and playing the market with their quote unquote extra money. Now, one thing I've been seeing a lot of is, let's talk about kind of like, protections and how these people can go about the market, because sometimes these people will announce on social media, hey, I'm investing in XYZ, you should too. Things like that. Like, what should new people playing the stock market kind of avoid doing, just because I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of eyes now on every trade being made for the next little bit?
First of all, there are legal prohibitions on me actually giving investment advice on any specific level. But I can speak sort of in a general case of just investor protection. Knowing what you're investing in with specificity is very helpful, because if you sort of follow trends, you can get left behind on trends. And one thing I've heard this phrase used sometimes is, you see a stock going down. I mentioned Boeing earlier in the recording. You see a stock like Boeing going down, and you want to get it at the bottom because you think you're going to get it back on its way up. Sometimes we call that trying to catch a knife. Because if you see something on its way down and you think to yourself, like, oh, well, it'll eventually go back up, maybe it won't. Boeing's a pretty safe company. I mean, I'm not trashing Boeing. That's when this came up as a conversation topic. But you'll see something, you'll say like, oh, well, well, I won't pick a specific company, but that's something to be aware of. The other thing to sort of be aware of is be a big believer in, like, trust your gut. If a company's telling you something that you're thinking like, wow, that's incredible, it might actually not be credible. Notwithstanding the fact that we have these disclosure obligations, notwithstanding the fact there's liability, specifically the Securities Act for misrepresentations, notwithstanding the fact that we have a Securities Commission, all these sorts of things, there are bad actors out there that still do these bad things.
Yep.
If all these allegations against Robinhood are proven to be true, like, that's the kind of thing that all of a sudden you're in trouble for as an individual retail investor. I do also want to touch really briefly on that, since Boris brought it up. Are you able to talk about what trading on the margin is, really briefly, from an abstract level?
But it's a little bit outside my bailiwick.
Yeah, fair. All right, yeah. I just mean in terms of it's you're borrowing money usually from your broker that you're trading with.
Yeah,
and that's part of
like
what
I say, in generalities, that's what my understanding is.
I just wanted that high level
details.
Yeah, I just want a high level because one of the reasons that Robinhood did really well for a spell there was they had very good margin terms. And I don't know if you know enough to comment on this, Ian, or not, but my understanding in tied to that is that, broadly speaking, Canada has more stringent regulations about trading on the margin than the States do.
I believe that to be the case,
Yeah.
Having spoken to other people about this in the past. I have yet to have reason to sort of go down that legal rabbit hole and learn a lot about it.
That's fair, yeah.
But I do know, I can say in general, Canadian regulator and Canadian regulation is a bit more stringent than that of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we can also point out.
Sorry.
I know I've seen on while people were reacting to what's going on with Robinhood, I saw a lot of Canadians online going, "Oh, I can fully trade the stock. It's not prohibited from my particular Canadian app."
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah, you cannot use Robinhood if you're a Canadian citizen without an American account. You're not like you have to prove that you have an American set of holdings to use Robinhood as a Canadian.
Yeah, I'm just saying that Canadians were still able to trade it on their apps because they weren't faced with what Robinhood is claiming.
Yeah.
To further the point that we probably have better protections here or better regulation on that stuff.
In general, yes, that is my understanding.
I want to circle around briefly to one very closely related story before we lose you, because I know we got to get close to wrapping up pretty soon. But so AMC got a similar but smaller bump from Wall Street Bets, and they in turn were able to use that to renegotiate their debt. For a layperson, what? How?
Again, this is a specific situation. I do know that is that will when they have good financial moments, will then seek to renegotiate debt conditions, and whatever those conditions are, or whatever those investment vehicles are, it's sort of between them. And sometimes these places are fine with changing the debt conditions because they wanted to anyway, and it helps them de-risk if they're not charging punishing interest. Result in a default. But those are all each individual business decisions rather than sort of legal issues as much. Yeah. I mean, I saw not only AMC, but I think I saw someone saying like, so is Blockbuster about to get a lot of money shot into it? Also, I think BlackBerry's had a very good opening to this quarter.
Yeah, BlackBerry. There's a few. Apple and Microsoft did surprisingly poorly. Tesla's the poster child of this. Given that,
it's sort of an odd throwback to 2008 with Biden administration taking over, BlackBerry being important. Yeah, it's just the whole world reverted about 12 years, just briefly.
Francis Fukuyama was right. History ended. Boris, Phil, is there anything else you want to wrap this up with? I know we're getting close to time.
No, I honestly think that we got a lot of information. I think that, our listeners who do want to start dipping their toes into the market for sure have some things to think about, to do some more research. And again, we're not trying to give anyone any advice. We're not trying to give anyone any legal advice, any stock advice, anything. We're just trying to put information in your earbuds so that you can take it and make your own decisions. Yeah.
And you're being informed, which is important, and you can understand some of this stuff. Ian, I know that you're a lawyer, so you probably don't need to do the usual social media shout out that a lot of our guests do. Is there anything, a cause, a thing you care about that you want to give some attention to, or anything like that?
Wow, I mean, you're putting me on the spot now. I
forgot to prep you for this one.
I'm in my investor rights headspace, so I'm just sort of thinking like, please invest well and don't lose money.
Yeah.
Love it.
Look at the charts.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I'll do Ian's shout out for him then really quick, because Ian has pulling me into Sea of Thieves, which is apparently a good game. So we'll find out, and I'll probably report back on that.
Great.
Everyone is playing this game. You're like the fifth person that I know who's like getting back into this game.
Ian's pulling me in.
Damn.
Wow, I went there once, and
I've been enjoying it a lot.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Ian, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much. And, best of luck. And I'm sure we're going to be in touch because I think this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay. It was a really great conversation.
Thank you.
Awesome.
That was awesome.
And that was that. Thank you so much, Ian. I really enjoyed that interview a lot. Ian taught us a lot about the markets, what's legal, what's not legal. He talked to us about, gotchas, so to speak. And that was a fantastic interview. So, Tyler, thank you for bringing him on. Thank you for having him join the It's Canon podcast family. And I hope he enjoyed himself.
Yeah, Ian's a great buddy of mine. I've known him for longer than a decade. And he asked me to mention that if you have any investor rights issues, if you got screwed over by Robinhood and you're a Canadian somehow, I don't think that one's possible. But let's say you get screwed over by, I don't know, Quest Trade or someone. He said, feel free to drop him a line at literovich@gmail.com. That is LITEROVICH@gmail.com. And yeah, long Ukrainian last names.
I know. I love it. Thank you so much, Ian. And I hope you're listening, and I hope that you come back so that we can nerd out about legality and legal stuff a lot longer, because honestly, this has been such a fun week for me because, I don't know if you guys have noticed, we're going to talk about this before we go. It's the It's Canon podcast where we talk about comics, video games, etc., etc. Yeah. We were known as the Geek Show, but now we're going to be known as the Pop Culture Show because pop culture is where it's at. We are talking about more than just the geek stuff. We're talking about what matters in the world.
Yeah. It's a good thing to be in. Good thing to talk about. And we do a lot of coverage on that stuff.
Exactly. So we can talk literally about anything and everything. And that's the important thing because it's all in canon. All right, guys. It's been a hell of a week. It's been a hell of a night for... Okay, I've been podcasting for 8 hours today. So I am tired. I am a little exhausted, I should say. A little loopy. Work's been crazy. And we have a show on Sunday to prepare for. But before then, let me tell you about some stuff. We have another special coming. Phil and Tyler don't even know about this. But Matt and I have been working on the wrestling side. And we have not one, but 2 shows coming this weekend on the It's Canon podcast. And we're going to be talking about all things Royal Rumble. We're going to be ranking every single Royal Rumble match from 1988 to 2021. Yes, we're including the show that happened just a few days ago. We have ranked, or he has ranked, every match. We're going to go through that list. It's going to be not 1, but 2 episodes. 2 episodes full of memories, full of rankings, full of me jibber-jabbering, and interviews. So you have to tune in to see who we're going to interview, and it's going to be a couple fun stuff happening there. And on Sunday, as always, we're going to have our news episode. Guys, that's that. So, Phil, do your thing.
All right. If you're looking to get in contact with us, you can find us on the internet at www.itscanonpodcast.com. You can track us down on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at It's Canon Podcast. You can email us at show@itscanonpodcast.com. You can subscribe to our show basically on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, anywhere you find podcasts, you're going to find the It's Canon Podcast show. So please be sure to make sure that you click the subscribe button and to leave a rate and review, if possible, on the platform of choice for listening. And thank you so much for lending us your ears for this
guys,
episode.
we have so much. Thank you so much for that, Phil. But guys, we have so much happening on the show. We're thinking of contests. We're thinking of future interviews. We're going to expand the coverage now that we're all into pop culture. I have some interviews lined up with some local Toronto artists. It's going to be fun. I think we have some really good specials lined up, and it's going to be so much fun because we're the It's Canon Podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things pop culture, the podcast where we talk about all things comics, movies, video games, books, Lego, etc. And the best part of it is what?
It's in Canon.
Boom. He's Phil. He's Tyler. I'm Boris. Good night.
Tyler's gotta go sleepy.
You know that this is still recording, right?
I didn't hear what you said.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're disregarded.
It really doesn't matter. If anyone's still listening, hey, power to you.
We're still recording. That's what you're saying.